Someone filed a report about us. What? They didn't mention your name, but the KGB knows something.
How and why did Firebird become a passion project for you and Peter? And what fascinated you about the core story that demanded that you tell it?
The story actually, like, Peter came across 10 years ago at the Berlin Film Festival, and the real man behind the story, Sergei Fetisov, who wrote the original story, basically a memoir of his true experience. He journaled and released actually in Russia in the early 90s. And actually, it was then he gave it to his friend, who's a film journalist who was working at Mosfilm. And he actually also ironically called Sergei, basically then passed it on to Peter. And then Peter read the script over a weekend and was very moved by it. And he actually then began adapting it into a screenplay.
Okay.
That was about 8 or 9 years ago. And then we met about 7 years ago. I was introduced to Peter actually to play the lead in the film. And then that basically led to us like shooting a teaser to help raise the rest of the financing for the film, because it's 100% independently financed, which then turned into more than 2 years worth of rewriting, restructuring the script and researching it, and getting to meet the real Sergei in Russia and, you know, get to know him in Moscow. I love like the aesthetic of what sort of like military environments can be like, not necessarily the kind of gory details. And then also just a very curious type of relationship, which I was asking myself, I was like, how is this even possible at this time?
The love triangle is key to the understanding of both the people and situation the characters are in. What was it about Oleg and Diana that had you and Peter knowing that they could deliver the triangle with authenticity? Because I assume they came in later.
Yeah, we actually had a very, very lengthy casting process actually for the principal cast, actually for the 4 other lead roles.
Right.
We had like about 2,400 self-tape submissions. And then our casting director and her amazing assistant went through pretty much all of those and then sent us shortlists. And then we then reviewed a lot of those self-tapes. And then we invited some people to audition. And we basically were looking in England, in Europe, and then we started looking in Russia as well. And our main proviso really was to kind of basically find the best person for the job. We weren't like actually super preferential about where they had to come from, but really just had to embody the characters. And both with Diana and with Oleg, it was kind of really the case that they kind of walked into the room and we just knew they had the essence of the character. Also, what was kind of good to know was that we didn't actually have to figure out the chemistry between the 3 of us ever together, because they're almost never together, which is really interesting actually in the film. So it was like, okay, providing that I have chemistry with Diana and she does with me, and then Oleg does with me, and then but then it kind of interesting, never actually in the triangle, which is the most like ironic thing.
Okay, because of military rank and Soviet culture in general at the time, the character of Sergei has to take on the burden of the relationship. Between Roman and Sergei, who do you feel was most demoralized in this arrangement?
Everyone, the 3 principal characters, or even the supporting characters as well, are acting out of the rules inflicted by a totalitarian system. And that kind of gives a lot of the time people not the choices that they would have in a society such as modern day today. So, for example, you know, Sergei can't ever reveal certain things to Louisa. And then, of course, when also Louisa mentions a certain incident happening to Sergei, he can't say anything about anything that's happened before. So it's a very tough time for all of them. But, you know, Roman has his duty, And like he says, very well, in the script that we wrote this, he was like, the only place I really feel free is the sky. And so when he's placed in that position of kind of going career or love,
Right.
that's obviously like a downfall for him. And then like for Sergei as well, he's much more about basically following love at all costs.
Right.
And kind of in as sort of dangerous a circumstance as he's willing to go with. Maybe he's naive because he's younger, but like I think we can all relate to the fact that actually when you're in love, how unlimited you could feel.
So you are creating a Cold War era Soviet atmosphere, which includes the military, that is a mystery to most people. What did you want to emphasize within that atmosphere to give the audience an idea of what it was like? I mean, this is 40 years ago now. So,
I mean, we've been blessed with such an amazing team, and people who have, lived through that time quite extensively. Like our cinematographer, Mike, has, lived through a large majority of the Soviet Union time. Peter, to a degree, when he was younger as well. And a lot of the supporting actors that are in the film of like, everybody who's sort of 30 plus lived around that time. And so they could kind of really bring this real authenticity from a character point of view, but also from the aesthetic point of view. And then we also had the kind of policy really about no compromises, really, when it comes to being very specific about things like uniform, backgrounds, materials that things were made from. We've been really blessed with a very, very good team who, like I said, have lived through a lot of this time where, like, for example, I have honestly no idea what would have been the right aesthetic sort of researching this period of time.
This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2021.